The assembled crowd congratulates the emperor on his birthday. Suddenly, a woman in a black dress enters the hall, causing bewilderment. They whisper that she is shameless, for this woman, Adele, is widely known as the villainess, who poisoned her elderly husband and seduced her stepson. Everyone wonders why the emperor continues to invite this notorious figure to events. In her hands, she carries a gift for the emperor, which some say resembles an urn. Adele greeted the emperor and presented her gift, cookies. She had baked herself. Everyone in the hall laughed at the paltry offering, and the queen, mocking the presenter, said, "Weren't these the very cookies she used to ruthlessly poison her husband?" Suddenly, an incredibly handsome man, widely known as the best warrior and tycoon, joins the conversation. He asks to try the cookies that Adele brought.
They are the most delicious cookies I have ever tasted.
The emperor couldn't resist trying them as well, and he liked them so much he invited everyone to try the cookies. The whole hall was energized, and everyone began sampling the treats. The handsome man asks for Adele's hand to dance. She agrees, thinking that this partner resembles the poor lad she once abandoned. He grabs her by the waist, pulls her close, and smirks, saying,
"Long time no see, Adele."
She blushes with surprise, for this handsome fellow is Chris, the boy she once abandoned. He pulls her closer and whispers that his name is now Count Christian Weiss, but she can still call him by his first name. A smile plays on his lips as he says,
"You are the reason I can dance without stepping on my partner's feet. After all, you were the one who taught me."
It's been a long time since I danced.
Adele replies, so it will be difficult. But Chris reassures her, saying he will lead. Adele smiles, a smile she hasn't shared in a long time, thinking that his dancing style hasn't changed at all since childhood. A few days later, a friend comes to Adele's house and asks how the banquet went. Were there any difficulties? She inquires, noting that Adele is behaving quite unusually. Adele blushes with embarrassment and starts saying it's all nonsense. But her friend observes, "Then why are you so flustered?" As if she were a woman in love. "Are you truly smitten? Is it Count Christian Weiss?" The friend asks. Adele is surprised that her friend knows his name, but she only replies that everyone knows him. He is the most popular man in the kingdom, and she'd better forget about him, as his wedding to the crown princess is soon to take place. The emperor is in a precarious position, and he needs a strong son-in-law to be able to resist the powerful elder council, which consists of 5 influential families that even the emperor cannot oppose. The Oswald family, whom Adele married into, is one of them. Adele reflects that she should be happy for Chris, since he has achieved so much, but for some reason, she feels a pang of sadness. Suddenly, a maid bursts into the house and announces that they have a guest. A carriage has arrived. Girls tells Adele not to worry, as they will protect her if anything happens. Adele says they shouldn't worry, as she can simply poison them. They arrived, and Chris emerged from the carriage with a bouquet of flowers. Girls left, leaving the pair alone.
"Why did you leave the banquet without a word?"
She couldn't tell him the truth, so she simply said that she came just to congratulate the emperor and leave. He observes that she has changed, if his feelings were hurt.
Sorry.
She said,
"You're good at constantly running away. Don't you want to tell me anything else?"
She asked if his leg was hurting, and an awkward silence ensued. Chris asked how she had been all this time, and Adele, with an awkward expression, said that she was fine. She thanked him for the flowers, and he said that next time he would bring her something for the house. As she is missing many things, "You will come again?" she asked with surprise.
"Can't I come see you?"
He replied. Adele said she didn't mean that. She doesn't want any rumors to start, and he says there's nothing wrong with a man visiting a widow. Adele said that she doesn't see him as a suitor. He's more like a brother to her. He approached her and gently said,
"Then there won't be any problems."
Adele became flustered and almost fell. Chris asked why she was so surprised, if she had any strange thoughts in her head. Adele blushed and turned her head away, but Chris scratched her chin and said,
"Don't look away. It's been so long since we've seen each other."
She abruptly grabbed his cheeks and told him to stop joking around. "You look like a little puppy," she said. Chris said that he still remembers how wonderful the smile of that little girl, who went crazy for apple pie, looked. Coming even closer to her, looking into her eyes, he asked,
"Don't you remember who my first kiss was with?"
She pushed him away and said it wasn't a kiss. I was just doing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation after you almost drowned.
Then why did you turn as red as a tomato?
She began denying it, saying that his eyes were bad. Chris shouted loudly.
Damn it, you stubborn woman.
She laughed loudly, as he used to call her stubborn all the time as a child. She said that she was very happy to see him, but he better not come here again, as it won't be good for him to be associated with someone like her.
Why? Because you're the woman who poisoned her husband.
He said that he doesn't care whether she poisoned him or not. Right now, her reputation cannot affect him. She asks how he became a noble, to which Chris replies that he brought glory to the emperor, and immediately asked why she still hadn't fed her guests. She said that she had no food, but she would try to find something. He smiled and thanked her, as he can only rely on her. Chris looked at his hand and remembered why he was here. At dinner with the emperor, he received a drawing of Adel and an order from the emperor. To get close to her and find the documents of Adel's deceased husband, he must find a document with the emperor's signature. Adel brought him a simple soup, but Chris had already fallen asleep. She noted that he looks like a child when he sleeps. Adel fell asleep, and in her dream, events from 10 years ago take place. When she almost drowned, but Chris saved her, she was terribly frightened and begged the young boy to open his eyes. She began giving him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. He opened his eyes, and they began kissing strangely over and over again. When she woke up, he was no longer there. He got into the carriage with his vice captain, who began asking if his wife liked the flowers he had chosen for him. Chris blushed deeply and said that he would no longer let him choose gifts. The vice captain asked why he left so early, as they were having a good time, to which Chris replied that his mating season would soon begin. The vice captain asked what their relationship was, as they had known each other for a long time. Chris replied that Adele insists on calling him her brother, but she is the woman who turned him into a beast. Her scent is irresistible, especially on snowy nights like this. The vice captain sees how important this woman is to Chris, says that he will investigate her case. Chris said,
That's enough. If she's been framed, she will ask for help herself. If she doesn't, it means she doesn't feel wronged.
The vice captain was surprised, asking,
But what if the woman you care for is framed like that?
Chris interrupted and said,
Not every woman I want to hold is someone I truly care for. Unlike a traitor, I'm not that generous.
Chris' sudden concern for Adele surprised the vice president. He knew her history, a marriage to an elderly marquis at 18, his suspicious death by poisoning, and rumors of an affair with her stepson. Chris ordered to stop talking and prepare a carriage and a gift for Adele. After the count left, Adele's friends rushed to her, asking what had happened between them. Did he propose? One of her friends asked. Adele tried to deny it, saying that it wasn't like that at all. Her friends began to smirk, saying that if he brought her flowers, he's completely smitten with her. Adele asked Tanya how she knew Count Weiss, wondering if he was that famous. Tanya replied, Of course. He's a war hero and the captain of the White Ghosts, the most renowned knight order in the Claim Empire. Adele was surprised by Chris's position. Her friends eagerly asked again, What did he say? Did he propose or ask you on a date? Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Someone from the Imperial Palace had come to see them. The girls were very surprised. They announced that the Emperor really liked her desserts, and from that moment on, she would be supplying desserts to the Imperial Palace on a regular basis, and they gave her a contract. Adele was delighted, as she wouldn't have to worry about making a living anymore. Unexpectedly, other noble ladies entered the room, also wanting to order desserts from Adele, as they had really liked them. They sat down at the table and began to eat and praise the desserts. Adele felt awkward about the noble ladies being so friendly to her. One of them abruptly asked about her relationship with Count Weiss. Adele simply said, Excuse me? They began to talk about how beautiful they looked together at the banquet. They began to ask her to arrange a meeting with His Majesty. Adele realized that the cookies were just a pretext. They had come for something else entirely. Adele thought that there was already talk about Chris's engagement to the princess, and if rumors started spreading, it could harm him. She exclaimed that she and Count Weiss were not in a relationship at all. She began to think of how to explain it all, and said that Count Weiss was actually her younger brother. Everyone was very surprised. Adele continued, saying that they were like family since childhood, that they had lost touch but met again at the banquet. The girls exchanged glances, noting that the atmosphere between them at the ball didn't look so ordinary. Lady Hans asked if they were really not dating and said that her family was hosting a New Year's party and invited Adele. Adele declined as she didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable, but her friend said she should go and return to high society. Lady Hans smiled and said that Lady Oswald could bring a friend with her as she would be more comfortable. Her friend began to look at her with puppy eyes, asking her to go to the party together, and she agreed. Night fell, and everyone left. Tanya sighed in disappointment, saying that she thought that she and Count Weiss would work out, and she would rub it in the Oswald family's faces. Adele replied that it didn't matter anymore, and that she shouldn't call her my lady because people would misunderstand. Tanya said, "Our lady has never had a proper married life. You only suffered. At the very least, I don't want to remind her of those times by calling her madam." Tanya asked if she had such a brother, why she never asked for help, suggesting that perhaps what happened in the Oswald family wouldn't have happened then. Adele cut herself on a rose, and Tanya apologized for bringing up the subject. Adele said that she was just flustered at the moment, and that she had already forgotten about what happened in the Oswald house. As if it were possible to forget such a thing. Days later, the girls arrived at Mrs. Hans's opulent mansion, the venue for a lavish social gathering. A stern attendant questioned their presence, prompting the girls to present their invitation. The attendant's surprise was evident, leading Adele to retort, "If we weren't invited, why would we bother coming?" A melodious voice echoed from behind, revealing a young woman with radiant blonde hair. Well, she remarked, a hint of sarcasm lacing her tone. "Of all the places to bump into you." The blonde lady, Sarah, introduced herself as the daughter of the late Marquis Oswald. Her lips curled into a smirk as she mocked Adele. "Didn't you hear the dress code for this soiree? It's fur." Mrs. Hans, who had extended the invitation, chimed in. "Oh, I didn't mention the dress code earlier because I assumed you wouldn't have the funds for such attire. But if you're desperate, you could always rummage through my old furs." Adele's mind raced. She realized why they were invited. Mrs. Hans is one of Sarah's cronies, she thought. That explains our invitation. Just as Adele was about to retreat, her friend gently tugged her arm, cautioning against a hasty exit that would signal defeat. Adele, regaining her composure, agreed. Adele thanked Mrs. Hans for the generous offer and told them to find an outfit for her friend to her liking. Her friend, seizing the moment, inquired about Mrs. Hans's jewelry collection. Knowing her reputation for opulence, Mrs. Hans could only manage a nervous chuckle in response. Adele, turning to Mrs. Hans, issued a veiled warning, her tone firm. "I trust you'll ensure my friend enjoys this evening to the fullest." A flicker of unease crossed Mrs. Hans's face as she and the other girls exchanged apprehensive glances. Did Adele really poison the Marquis? As the crowd dispersed, Adele sought out Sarah, questioning her involvement in the unfolding drama. Sarah simply shrugged, a playful smirk dancing on her lips. "Who knows?" she replied. "Don't go pointing fingers. It's such an unbecoming habit." Without missing a beat, Sarah shifted her focus to Adele, inquiring about the veracity of Count Weiss's familial connection. Adele confirmed that he's her brother. Sarah asked to set her up with him. Adele, taken aback, questioned her motives. Sarah countered with a proposition. "If you help me, I'll help clear your name." Adele met her words with skepticism. Would clearing my name truly change anything at this point? Sarah pressed on. "Think about it. You clear your name and Count Weiss gains the prestige of the Oswald family, perhaps even a seat on the Elder Council." Adele erupted in laughter. "Perhaps Sarah should think more carefully," she retorted. "Does she not understand why His Majesty places such trust in Count Weiss?" Sarah's eyes widened in realization. "Are you implying that he could become the Emperor's son-in-law?" Adele, with a sly smile, countered, "Who knows? Such matters are beyond my comprehension. But if I were in his shoes, I'd certainly weigh my options carefully. A princess or the daughter of a disgraced Marquis." As Adele turned to leave and join the festivities, Sarah called out, "You have feelings for him, don't you? I saw you dancing at the ball. It was far from a platonic family affair." Adele simply smiled, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Sarah," she teased, "you seem awfully preoccupied with me. Such intense interest." Sarah, flustered, vehemently denied any such notions. Adele, unfazed, delivered a parting shot. "You're always hovering around me, like a pathetic child craving their mother's love. It's time to grow up." Sarah, her pride wounded, retorted, "I'll make sure to be with Count Weiss." Adele, with a knowing smirk, simply replied, "We'll see about that." Sarah Oswald, a force to be reckoned with in Kalim's high society, wielded her influence like a weapon. Those who dared to cross her path found themselves swiftly ostracized, their reputations tarnished beyond repair. Adele knew this all too well, having been branded a wicked woman who poisoned her husband and seduced her stepson, all thanks to Sarah's machinations. Fearful of becoming the next target, the noble ladies distanced themselves from Adele, leaving her isolated and vulnerable. However, when Adele entered the hall, she was surprised to find that the noble ladies who had been unfriendly to her were now praising her desserts and asking about Count Weiss. Just then, Adele's friend approached, seeking her approval of her new attire. Adele, with genuine warmth, assured her that she looked stunning. Friends suggest they should enjoy the party to annoy Sarah. They each drink a glass of wine. Suddenly, Adele feels ill and goes into the hallway. A man approaches her from behind, offering help. Adele declines, but the man insists, covering her mouth with his hand.
It's been a while since you rejected me.
Meanwhile, in the main hall, everyone greets the arriving princess. The princess asks why she doesn't see the Marchioness. The girls whisper that they saw her go down the hall. Sarah offers to bring her mother, and the princess agrees to go with her. They arrive at the door and hear strange moans. The princess is embarrassed and suggests they greet her some other time. Sarah, with a determined look, insists they find out what's happening. Inside, they find a bound man. Meanwhile, in another room, Adele opens her eyes and sees Chris. She asks what he's doing there. He offers her water and asks what happened. She replies that she's not sure. She only had a little to drink. Adele thanks Chris for saving her. Chris smiles and says she shouldn't thank him. She almost cut his throat, so it's Count Eaton he saved. Adele is flustered and snatches her dagger from his hands, claiming it's for self-defense. Chris remarks that it's a fitting accessory for a villainess. He takes her hand and tells her not to move. He tends to her wound, saying that swinging a weapon without knowing how to use it isn't self-defense, but self-harm. Adele says she carries the knife for peace of mind and thanks Chris for helping her. Chris downplays his actions, saying he just knocked the Count out and tied him to a chair without clothes. Adele laughs. She asks how he ended up at the party. Chris replies that he's escorting the princess. Adele's smile fades. "Oh, I see," she says, confused by her sudden discomfort. She pulls her hand away and says they should return. Chris hears sounds outside, warning that someone is looking for her. He suggests they leave through the window to avoid trouble. He offers Adele his hand, but she insists she can manage on her own. "See," she says. "I told you I could do it." Chris clenches his hand into a fist, looking disappointed. They were on a walk talking about desserts. Chris confessed his craving for apple pie, the kind Adele's mother used to bake. A shadow crossed Adele's face. If only she'd known her mother's time was so short, she would have clung to those recipes like precious jewels. Chris, ever perceptive, reassured her. He didn't need a perfect replica of her mother's pie. He wanted her pie. Adele agreed, a flicker of warmth in her eyes. "Just tell me where to send it," she offered. Chris's eyes gleamed.
Or you could invite me over,
He suggested. Hesitation flickered across Adele's face. The princess might misunderstand. Chris's playful demeanor vanished. He stepped closer, his voice hardening.
The princess has nothing to do with this. Adele, you've told everyone I'm like a brother to you. It's perfectly natural for a brother to visit his sister.
He leaned in, his gaze intense.
The more you push me away, the more I'll push back. Don't provoke me, Adele.
Later, Adele's friend found her and asked where she'd been. The princess has arrived. They rushed to greet her, and Adele saw Chris chatting with the princess, whose expression was unmistakable. She was smitten. The princess greeted Adele warmly, inviting her to the palace for a chat. Confused, Adele agreed. The princess whispers to her, asking her to tell her more about the Count. Adele agrees to that, and the princess leaves with the Count. Some older ladies whisper between themselves that a royal wedding will happen soon, which Adele hears. Sarah, Adele's stepdaughter, appears, and her and Adele have an argument, which leaves Sarah shaking with anger. In a carriage, Adele and her friend, Maya, discuss the unsettling encounter with Count Eaton. They recall his inappropriate proposal to Adele years ago, shortly before her late husband's funeral. They're relieved that nothing untoward happened at the party, thanks to Count Weiss's timely arrival. Mia reveals that she also collapsed after drinking the wine, suspecting foul play. She believes Caesura and Count Eaton conspired to spike their drinks. Mia is happy that she got her revenge. At the party, Sarah suffers a public humiliation when caramel becomes stuck in her hair. Elsewhere, Chris and the princess arrive in a carriage. The princess remarks on Adel's beauty, suggesting she could easily win Chris's affections. After a brief silence, Chris compliments the princess's beauty. The princess, emboldened, asks him to kiss her. When he doesn't respond, she gets embarrassed and attempts to leave. However, Chris gracefully takes her hand and kisses the back of it, wishing her sweet dreams. Adele bakes apple pies for Chris, but the taste falls short of her mother's. This triggers a flashback to Adele's childhood. Her mother owned the town's best bakery, providing for them comfortably. A young, beautiful, and fragile boy, rumored to be the son of a miner whose mother had abandoned him, caught Adele's attention in the bakery line. Feeling drawn to him, she offered him a dessert. From that day on, Chris visited daily, becoming like a puppy following Adele, who taught him many things. Her mother embraced him like a son, and they lived happily together. Tragedy struck when Adele was 18. Her mother was mauled by a beast in the forest and returned home a corpse. Back in the present, Adele's thoughts about Chris's past actions are interrupted by her friends, who are amazed by the sheer number of pies. And then one friend drops a bombshell. Her brother, Mark, is coming to visit. She apologizes for the surprise, explaining that Mark has recently separated from his wife, and that she wants to remain neutral in any potential conflict. She also suggests Adele needs to meet new people to avoid the attentions of men like Viscount Eaton, and promptly gives Adele a makeover. Mark arrives, escorted by Mia. Despite already knowing each other, they go through the formality of a reintroduction. Left alone, an awkward silence hangs in the air until Adele offers Mark tea and pie. A brief, uncomfortable flirtation ensues, prompting Adele to change the subject. Mark counters her attempt to steer the conversation. Noting her apparent eagerness for him to leave, Adele apologizes, admitting her awkwardness. Mark confesses to feeling the same, suggesting that with more time together, the awkwardness will fade. Their conversation is cut short by the arrival of Chris, who enters Adele's house, visibly jealous. He asks if he's interrupting their pleasant time. Adele, instead of clarifying the situation, introduces Chris to Mark. Chris's jealousy explodes into rudeness, insulting Mark despite Adele's protests. Mark, unfazed, takes his leave, but not before kissing the back of Adele's hand, shocking both her and Chris. He then smiles directly at Chris, further fueling Chris's anger.